Hi everyone, Elsie Jensen here. Today we are going to make some homemade granola bars. We're going to prep some sourdough halfy half rolls for dinner tonight, melt, and then bake up our cookies, the other half of our cookies that we made yesterday. So we got a lot of things going today, but first we are going to start by putting a half a teaspoon of yeast into our warm cup of milk. We have 3/4 cup of milk here. And that's why I kind of called these my half and halfy rolls, because we're using a lot of sourdough starter, but we are also using a little bit of yeast for it to just kind of help it on its way. So it's not a true sourdough roll, but it's more of like a half and half. And so I've got a half a teaspoon of yeast in here, and we're going to add in about a fourth of a cup of sugar. And then we're going to let it bloom for a second. So let me just get that in here, and I'm going to sprinkle it over. And that sugar is going to just kind of help activate it, but it's also just going to give a little pinch of sweetness to our rolls. Let me grab a little fork here to give it a good stir. Here we go. And that way that can start to bloom. And for our granola bars, these are kind of going to be like a little bit of a, mock, the chewy granola bars that have a little bit of Rice Krispie in them. So we are going to make those. But first, what we need to do is we need to take 2 cups of oats, and we're going to spread them out on parchment paper. And we're just going to put these in the oven for about 3 to 4 minutes to toast up. And this is going to help bring out their flavor for our granola bars. So I'm just going to spread them out. You can use either quick or old-fashioned oats. I'm using old-fashioned, but either one works. So we are going to pop these in the oven. I do have my oven preheated to 375 because that is what we're going to be cooking our cookies at. So we'll have these toast for just a few minutes. And you're not necessarily cooking them, you're just roasting them like you would a nut to really bring out their flavor. So I'm going to just pop these in here. Perfect. And then I'm going to set my timer for about 3.5 minutes so that I'll know to come back over here so I don't forget about them, because I tend to forget about my oven if I don't check on it. Okay. While those are toasting up, let's start prepping our stuff for our dinner rolls tonight. So I made these dinner rolls earlier this week, and they were just so good. Everybody wants them again. I think we had them on our fried catfish dinner. They're like the softest rolls that have got a nice elasticity from them and a little touch of sweet, and were so good. So we are going to start by adding a 1/3 cup of sourdough starter. You want a starter that has been fed within the last 24 hours. So we fed ours yesterday. So this will be ready to go. And we're going to use a 1/3 cup. And then later in the stream, I'm going to actually feed this so that it will be nice and ready to make some bread tonight for tomorrow night. There we go. I'm just going to scrape out all of it in there. And so we have a 1/3 cup of sourdough discard or starter. So it's actually been fed. So it's discard, but it has to be fed in the last 24 hours because it needs to be a little bit active. And then we're going to use a 1/4 of a cup of melted butter, which is the same as a half a stick. So we're going to add this into our sourdough discard. And then we're going to add in 1 egg. So between the half a teaspoon of yeast, the sourdough starter, and the egg, that is what's really going to be rising these rolls. And they're so delicious. They're not, sometimes you can get a dinner roll that is crumbly or doesn't have that good elasticity on it. There's such a good roll. It's my favorite dinner roll that I make. But it does need, because it's using sourdough, it does need a couple of hours to kind of sit and stretch. That's why we're making it now, so it'll be ready for dinner time. So it takes about 8 hours for it to be ready. Okay, we've got it all mixed up here. Putting it in there. Now we're going to take our yeast and our warm milk with our sugar, and we're going to add it into our mixture. And then I want to just make sure I get all of that sugar in here. Here we go, get a spatula. Let's do my other one. So this is just to scrape out the little sugar, because when it gets in here, you want it for the yeast to help it bloom, but we also want it to be in our little rolls as well. Okay, we're going to get all of that out. Perfect. And we're going to give this a nice swirl to make sure we have it all evenly mixed up. And then we're going to add 1.5 teaspoons of salt to our mixture. So I am at 1.5 teaspoons is the same as half a tablespoon. So we're just going to put that in here. Doop. We're going to give this a good mix, and then our oats are ready to come out. They should be nice and toasted. So we're going to work over there. Again, the oats are not to be cooked all the way through, and you don't want them to be burnt or anything like that. So it's really, you just pop them in really quickly so that they can toast up nicely, bring out their flavor. There we go. Perfect. So give them a nice shake. And this is just going to kind of really enhance their flavor for our rolls. And go pop this timer off. Okay. Now we are going to add into our mix, we are going to add in our flour. Did I not set my flour out? Let me grab my flour at our pantry. We need 3 cups of flour. I have it right over here in my pantry. I just forgot to grab the tub. There we go. Say, I grabbed the oats instead, and I didn't think about the flour. Silly me. Okay, we need 3 cups of all-purpose flour. This recipe, you don't need to use bread flour on. It still has that great elasticity. It doesn't crumb. And it's a nice one that you don't have to have the specialty bread flour on, and they turn out great. So we want 3 cups of flour. So that's 2 and 3. Let's set this to the side. And now I'm going to use my dough whisk, and we're going to mix it all together. There we go. And we're going to incorporate it until it's got a nice big dough thing. And then we're going to knead it for a second. And we'll let it sit for a few minutes and then knead it again. The trick with this dough is you really want to knead it a lot in the beginning, because the more kneading you do, the better it turns out. That's what gives it its nice elasticity. And they were just so delicious. I think it was because I had Evie helping me that day, and she did a great job kneading it, and it turned out perfect. Okay. There we go. We're going to get all of that off of our dough whisk. And now I'm just going to take my kind of shag right here, and we're going to form it into a nice dough ball by, just pushing in and smushing it together. So a good knead on it. And it's not a super sticky dough. So it's not like a traditional sourdough, which starts out sticky and then it gets a little bit drier. This one is perfect from the start. Doesn't stick to you. Like, it has like a little wetness to it, but it's not super sticky. So we're going to really knead it because we want to develop the gluten in it well. There we go. And the best part is, what I like to do is kind of you knead it for a minute or two, then you take like a 10-minute break, let that flour hydrate, then you knead it again. And then a little short break, you knead it, and then you do every like 30-minute stretch and folds after that for 2 hours until it's ready to rise. Here we go. And you just really want to just push in into your, so with a kneading, if you're not familiar with kneading, you take your palms of your hands and you really push, and you're like really kind of moving the dough across your countertop like this. And what it is doing it is it's causing the dough to kind of stretch with it, and that helps the gluten develop. There we go. So we'll give it a few more kneads. You could also do this in a KitchenAid, like a mixture with a dough hook, but I find that the KitchenAid mixture, it does a decent job, but not quite as good as a true knead. Okay, we're gonna let this sit and hydrate for a few seconds. And while that's doing that, let's get our cookies out. We baked up half of them yesterday and they are already gone, but that's the nice thing about these cookies is I like to save half of them and bake them up so that they'll be nice and fresh. We grab a spoon. So these are the cookies we made yesterday. At lunchtime, we did the batter 2 ways. We've got chocolate chip and we got white chocolate macadamia nut. And I keep them in the fridge and I have them chill up nicely so that they cook up great, because if you cook them up right away, then they just spread out too fast because that butter's not cold. And I like a nice chewy cookie. I don't like a crispy cookie, at least not with chocolate chip or white chocolate macadamia nut. So I just use my spoon and we're just going to break off a little bit of the dough. And then I roll it into a ball. This gives you that kind of picture perfect circle cookie. And you don't have to roll it and do much work into the ball. It's just a little roll. And so what we did is for these cookies is we made a singular base for it. And then I divided the dough in half, and then one half we added chocolate chips. And then the other half we added white chocolate chips and macadamia nuts. So you can have 2 cookies, but you're not having to make 2 different batches really. Here we go. And these will cook at 375 for 9 minutes. So they cook up pretty fast. And you want to start, again, like I said, you want a nice, cold, chilled dough. Here we go. And I think we're going to have a hybrid one where it's both chocolate chips and macadamia nuts. I just moved both of my doughs into one bowl so I didn't have to take up so much room in my refrigerator. You can imagine with a family of 7, got 5 kids, every little space in our refrigerator is used. Okay, now we're getting our white chocolate macadamia nuts.
5 kids, 4 fridges.
Yes. I always say every little space is used up in our fridge, but I also neglect to say that I have 4 full-size fridges. I have 1 in our kitchen and then we have 3 in our garage. Because we really do use them all. We have one that is dedicated straight up for our drinks, all of the drinks, everyone. And so that's always stocked. And then we have one fridge where I keep, it's like my meat and then my onions and my potatoes. So that is one fridge for that. And then the other fridge is from all of my overflow produce that I make. That's why when everyone says, oh, do you do a lot of meal planning? And I'm like, no, but I always have a bunch of ingredients on hand. So that's kind of, when I go to the store, I just restock up on ingredients and then figure out what I'm making from there. And then our inside refrigerator is really primarily just the stuff that you kind of grab and go every single day for, like we've got some eggs and butter and milk and stuff. But I don't think it could go back to having less than 4 refrigerators now, which does sound insane. But we do, so like I do all the cooking for my parents and I do their grocery shopping. So when they need more milk or they need something, they just come and grab it out of our fridge. So it's not like just one household that we're making it up for. It is 2 households. So, 9 people. 2.5. And then I watch my niece and nephew a couple days a week, since they're the same age as as Jack and Teddy. And so we're also feeding them as well. Let's see if I can get, I think this last little bit might just be a delicious, maybe a teeny tiny cookie we can get out of it. I'll steal some from another one. There we go. This one's going to be primarily a nut cookie, nut, and a few chocolate chips in there. A teeny tiny baby cookie that can be for little Jackie. Okay. Let's pop these in the oven because I took that out of the fridge and you want to bake them up while you're cold. That's the point of chilling them. And it's great. It's like we baked them up last night. And of course, everybody ate. And then I sent some of my kids' lunches this morning. And so they were gone. And now we'll bake these up and we'll see how long these last. Put them on, always on your top level. And then we're going to cook them for 9 minutes. Now, if you do 2 trays, I always say the second tray on the bottom needs about a minute and a half more. And so once you take that first one out, you move it up and you bake it for about a minute and a half more, just because the tray really prevents the heat from going there. Just gonna give my hands a quick rinse. Okay. Let's see, are these? They are nice and cooled. Perfect. So let's get our bowl. And I'm just gonna slide. So you do it on the parchment paper so that you can easily pick it up and slide these into your bowl for our granola. That way I can move this out of the way. Let's start our sandwiches to prep, and then we will start making our things. Well, one second. We're going to make our glaze for our granola bar first because you want to let it cool so that it doesn't melt the chocolate chips when we add it in there. So we're going to start with a half a stick of butter, which is 1/4 of a cup. There we go. Just throw that in there. And then we're going to use a 1/3 cup of honey. So I'm going to eyeball it because it is such a pain to try to put honey in a container and put it out. And you really can't go overboard with the honey. So we've got a 1/3 cup of honey.
You're 5 milliliters short.
Give or take a few milliliters. And then we need a brown sugar, a 1/4 cup of brown sugar that is firmly packed. Now, these are similar to the like Chewy granola bars, but they do have a bit of a honey taste. So if you're not a fan of honey, or you could also use corn syrup instead and just use a 1/3 cup of corn syrup. And then you want a 1/4 of a cup of brown sugar packed down. So this is a 1/2 cup that I filled up. Let's give that in there. Make sure you pack it down firmly so you get all that good sugary taste to it. And I'm going to turn my back burner on low. And we're going to wait. We're going to stir it until the sugar has dissolved. Let me help if I put the right burner on. There we go. Let me get a little spatula for this. And once it is melted down, then what you're going to do is you're going to just let it boil on low for about 1 to 2 minutes. And this is going to allow it that when you add it to your oats, it will firm up after being in the refrigerator for an hour. So you're essentially making almost kind of like a candy sauce that will harden once it gets cold. Let's get our grilled cheeses here. Today we're doing pretty simple grilled cheeses. I think we're gonna have to use both loaves here. I've got my traditional sourdough. I'm gonna feed my starter so we can make some new loaves tonight because we are running down low. I'm gonna even this guy off, but we're just gonna do a cheddar and roast beef. So just a simple one. And let's get our nice slices here. But that's one thing I love so much about sourdough is it makes the best like grilled cheeses that are just so delicious. And, you make it, I'll make it for dinner. And then when you have it for dinner, you have it like nice and hot and fresh where you put your butter on it and it melts up so nicely. And then when we do, like for this, I'll either crisp it up in the toaster or have it after, but I don't have to buy nearly as much bread as I used to The only type of bread I really buy nowadays is, sandwich bread, like honey wheat that my kids like for their school. It's, because sourdough can get a little firmer after it. But I'm like, I've been thinking to myself, I'm like, I need to start making sandwich breads again. I used to. And then I just kind of stopped and I'm like, I should get back to it. So then we could be having fresh bread for everything. So we're going to just take a little bit of butter, room temperature, and we're going to spread it on each one. Just one side. This is going to be the side that is touching our skillet. You want to try to pick the most even side. That way you can toast the whole bread up versus just the ridges. Let's lay a piece down. And we're going to be doing smoked cheddar and then just some good old roast beef. So just a roast beef and cheddar melt. The smokiness, I will say, of the cheddar works really well with the roast beef. Here we go. We're kind of got a little mosaic pattern going along here. And just make sure your cheese doesn't overflow because you don't want it to burn down on thing. Let me give our butter and our brown sugar a little stir. You can see it's melting up there. And we're just waiting until it turns to a completely like smooth, liquid versus it being gritty from the brown sugar. So it needs to dissolve up. Okay. I'm going to do a nice thin layer of roast beef here. And you don't want to make it too thick because if you do too thick, then that cheese will just really struggle with like melting. But I'm going to do, my husband loves roast beef, so I'm just going to give him a little bit more, but we'll just go low and slow and cook it a little bit longer on there. And then we're going to just take our second layer of our cheeses. This is the smoked cheddar. There we go. Perfect. And let's put it on. Make sure we don't have any big pieces sticking out. And then I'm going to just have mine cooking at about a 6, which is a little bit more than a medium. And then we'll let them melt the butter and we'll do a couple of flips on there. Like it. There we go. Okay. You know what? I think I put my big one with my little one. There we go. Gotta make sure my bread is just about right. You don't want to have a big bread and a half one. Okay, we've got our thing mixing up nicely here. So while we do this, we've had our dough sitting for our rolls tonight. And so now we want to do a next set of kneading. And this is really important.
You got a question? What type of bread are the sandwiches on?
So that is our homemade sourdough. So I do have that recipe posted on the link on our page where you can find it, as well as videos on how to make it. It is just the perfect sourdough. It turns out great every single time. It's a very simple recipe to make. It is literally just flour, water, starter, and salt. And it is great. I probably make 4 loaves of that a week. 4, unless we have more company, then I might make 5. But I typically make around 8 loaves a week of sourdough. And one is always like a specialty loaf, a bougie loaf. And then the other one is like our plain traditional loaf, because we use that one for our grilled cheeses or sandwiches. And we don't have bread. I don't make bread every single day because I do make other things. Like today we're making our sourdough rolls. And then yesterday we made some focaccia. And sometimes we'll have like homemade sourdough tortillas or naan. So I try to change it up, or biscuits. But we typically have a sourdough grain with every dinner. I just like to change it up so it's not always bread. Plus, bread takes about, if you're new to sourdough making, it takes about 2 days before you have a loaf ready. And that's, so I'm typically make it every 2 days.
You have a question? Are you an author as well?
I have written some books before. Yes, not a cookbook though, but I do have a couple books that you can buy on Amazon. I really enjoy writing and just having like a lot of fun with that. Okay, here we've got this. Let me turn off our syrup and our cookies are beeping away. Need my oven mitts. Perfect. So these are our chocolate chip and our white chocolate macadamia nut cookies. Beautiful. Perfect. You've got the nice kind of brown on them. They have a lovely dome shape because they're nice and chewy. That's from being in the refrigerator and cooling overnight. Let me grab a trivet to put these on. These are they were so good yesterday. They disappeared so fast. I only had a few left this morning to put in their lunches. But again, these were our homemade chocolate chip cookies where we use the same base dough, and then our white chocolate macadamia and nut cookies that we used. And then of course our little itty bitty baby one for Jack that had all the little scraps. And here's our hybrid. He used a little bit of both. Okay, so here we have our brown sugar and our honey in here, and with the butter. We're going to let it cool before we pour it in here because we want it to mellow out. Let's check our grilled cheeses to see if they are ready for their first flip. And there we go. So this one is really to melt the butter and warm everything up, and then we'll flip it one more time, and then we'll do the crisping up flip for both sides. Okay. So here, as you can see, I want you guys to see it. This is it got to a nice little bubble on it, and we had that for about a minute, but we were grabbing the cookies out while we were doing that, but I wanted to show you. So this is our syrup for our granola bars. And we have our 2 cups of our toasted oats here. And now we're going to put in 2 cups of Rice Krispies. I need to grab a clean cup because we don't want sourdough discard on it. I do have a recipe for sourdough discard granola bars, but I find this recipe is just so much better. So I always do this one. So now we're going to put 2 cups of Rice Krispies in. And this is kind of, when you buy the granola bars nowadays, like the chewy ones, they have Rice Krispies in them, which growing up, I don't ever remember them having Rice Krispies in them. I think that's a way to make them cheaper, but without changing their size. But they're nice. They give them a nice crunch. So we've got 2 cups of our toasted oats, and we've got 2 cups of our granola, or not our granola, of our Rice Krispies. Now, we've got our little sauce here. We're going to add just a little bit of salt to it, a half a teaspoon of salt, and then we're going to have a half a teaspoon of vanilla. And now these are going to have just a plain kind of flavor with it. If you were going to do like a cinnamon one or a different one, you could add your spices in now. But we are just doing like a honey vanilla kind of coating on it. We're going to give this a nice stir. There we go. And then just making sure it all gets mixed up in there. I'm going to flip my melts over. And now this is where we're going to do the nice crisping up for the nice brown color. So I'm going to rotate my skillet here, and I'm going to turn it up to about a 6. We had it at a 5, so a little 6 to now get that nice kind of crisping up color for it. Okay. Let's give a little shake, kind of mix these together. Now we are going to take our kind of sticky liquid, and I'm going to pour this all the way over our mixture here. I'm going to scoop any of this out that I can. There we go. And we're going to coat these up really nice with our lovely sauce that we made, our nice sticky sauce. And you really want to try to get it to all evenly coated as much as possible, because this is what's going to hold your granola bars together. There we go. Okay, well, now we're going to let them cool for a little second here. Let's see if these guys are ready for their second flip, and then we got to do we've got a nice kind of golden one. So maybe we want to, maybe a little bit longer. So we'll flip it back over, another minute or so. Now let's get our dough out here and knead. And I know you think, oh, we've been kneading this dough a lot. This kneading is what is going to give you the most tender, delicious rolls. So it is not, I will say it's a necessary step. It's kind of like if you've ever made homemade pasta. If your pasta is stiff when you made it, it's because you didn't knead it enough. And that's the same thing. A lot of times you can get rolls, you make them homemade, and they're stiff and they're hard. It's because you didn't knead your dough enough, because the kneading helps develop the gluten. And you're essentially breaking apart the chains as you're kneading.
So the kneading is needed.
Yes, the kneading is needed. It is a necessity. And if you have little helpers, like Evie was helping us on Tuesday, and so it's a great thing for kids to do, because they all love to play with Play-Doh, and it's essentially Play-Doh. There we go. And so now we've gotten our kneads. Perfect. Now we've got our nice golden crispy colors on here. That is the color I like. I'm going to turn it down just a smidge. Beautiful. My husband keeps trying to steal a cookie, and I'm like, they're too hot to eat. You need to let them sit for a second. Okay, we've got our granola bar. It's cooled down enough. And what we're going to do is, I like to add a mixture of mini chocolate chips and mini M&Ms. So you're going to use about a cup for the whole thing. So it's about a half and half. So a half a cup of each one. And I just really like to eyeball it. So we're going to put about a half cup of mini chocolate chips in. And we're going to put about a half cup of mini M&Ms. And you want mini versus full size, because they just work better in a granola bar. And then we're just going to give them a nice mix up. These remind me of the Kudos granola bars back in the day. They have, those were like, I think discontinued in like the late 90s maybe, but they had one that was M&Ms and chocolate chips, and they were so good. Okay, we've got our baking dish right here. And what I like to do is spray it with a little bit of cooking spray. That way when they have set and they come out, they'll slide right off. Now you could always line it with parchment paper if you wanted, but I find that this works out great. We're going to just put this whole bowl in here. There we go. We've got a little bit of the chocolate melting, which is fine. And there we go. And let me check our grilled cheeses real quick, because I don't want them to go bad. Perfect. So I'm going to turn these off. We'll let them sit. And now what you have to do with our granola bars is you have to press them down firmly so that you can cut them later. So they'll need to chill. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to slide them over, and I'm not using the full pan. This makes a good 8 in an 8x8. But for some reason, I have no idea where my 8x8 square is. I have an 8x8 round pan, like an 8-inch cake pan. But my square one, when we remodeled our kitchen, it disappeared. So I'm just using a 9x13. And you just want to push it down just like you would with Rice Krispie treats. And then you have our nice kind of, and I'll just push this right over here. Now, this is where you need to make sure when you push it down, you need to make sure you pushed it firmly. And now what they're going to do is they're going to chill. You can put them in the fridge or you can leave them on the countertop. The fridge works faster because in about an hour they're set. That's when you can cut them into your bar form and then wrap them up in a little bit of parchment paper, or you can just leave them like that. And then you put them in a Ziploc baggie and I send them to school with my kids. They're delicious. They taste really similar to the Chewy ones, except they have a bit of a honey flavor, which we love. We're big honey fans. But if you aren't, you could use corn syrup instead of honey, or agave. That works as well. Okay, our grilled cheese melts are done. So let me grab our plate. And see, we've got this nice kind of golden crispy right there. Perfect. This one's melting up really nicely. So we've got our roast beef and smoked cheddar melts on our homemade sourdough bread. And now our cookies, which my husband was trying to steal. They should be nice thing, but look, they've got a nice kind of golden crust, but here's where the beauty is. You see how you've got that nice chewy middle? These are the best. These are my favorite chocolate chip cookies. And this recipe is posted on the link on our page. We made them yesterday during the our group, so that video is there. So if you want to make them, you can go check out the recipe there. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day, show you what we're making for our family, and just kind of show you all the foods we're eating. And hopefully you guys learned something. Again, thank you so much. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And remember, all of our videos are uploaded on the link on our page.